Welcome to QTV's weekly roundup of the proceedings at the TRRC. I am Mamadou Mbodj. After a 2-week break from the sittings to do committee work and other outreach activities that form part of the package of its Never Again slogan, the TRRC resumed its sittings on Monday, 11 February. This is the second session, and it will focus on 11 November 1994, a day, it has been alleged, when many soldiers were killed by the junta at the Fajara and Yundum barracks. The first session had focused on events and states of affairs pre-1994, July 22nd itself, and immediately thereafter. According to the chairman, a good picture has emerged of the nature and extent of the human rights violations that occurred during and immediately after July 22nd, 1994. In the first week of the second session, which started on Monday and ended on Thursday, the Commission heard more testimonies directly relevant to July 22nd, 1994. Today, I'm joined on the panel by QTV correspondents covering the proceedings. On my right, we have Boubacar Bah, and on my left, we have Ansumana S.O. Nyase. So now, gentlemen, before we go into the testimonies, of the week's testimonies from witnesses, maybe we should spend a moment or two discussing the chairman's statement on Monday. Please, Ansumana, take us through it.
Thank you, Mr. Mbodj. It's great to be back after a 2 weeks break. The TRC, as you alluded to, has resumed its public hearings, and of course, before the first session, the chairman did make a statement. At least he gave a shocking preview of, the first theme, which has ended. Which is more focused on looking at events that happened pre the coup, and also some of the things that happened, just right after. In his statement, actually, he did made mention of some very salient points, and among them is the reaction that we've been having from certain individuals that have been adversely mentioned by witnesses, who've been giving our statements in the public media, to kind of contradict or dispute, some of the statements that have been made by these witnesses. And he also did give us, an overview of, what is to come afterwards, especially looking at the current theme that they are focusing on now, which is the November 11 incident. So there were very, salient point that he made mention in his address.
Yes, thank you. And he also said he gave us a format of how 20 session would unfold, 2019 would unfold. For instance, there will be, what, 8 sessions? He said there will be 8 sessions scheduled for 2019, and each session will last for 3 weeks. And something else, on 1 week of the month each, they will be doing outreach programs. Yes, and consultations and reviewing the outreach programs. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of the whole package? Because this is truth, reconciliation, and reparations. So occasionally they'll take breaks, because remember when they were on break, quite a few people came over to me and asked, why are they on break and stuff? But now we know the reasons.
Yes, I think the breaks will help them to prepare more. It's not about, there's a lot of nitty-gritty that goes there that probably people don't know. You just don't go and register or consult them and just appear before the commission. I heard a lot of things happen because first they will sit with you, talk to you, probably take preliminary statements even before you appear, and discuss a few things with you. So things happen, and they need to prepare for all that. So that's why during these breaks they need to work on things like that, the next witnesses and what should happen. And also during that period also they used that time to visit places, like they went to Mile 2 during that time. It was during, in fact, I think that was it during the break, or
just before?
Yes, before the break.
But during the break they went to the victim center.
Exactly, victim center. And
also,
the commissioners cannot go and visit places while the sitting should continue. So that's why, if there's a break, they will use that opportunity to visit places, like we've seen them, visiting the NIA on Friday, which is not a sitting day. So obviously these breaks are important. But also, as you said, people whose names are mentioned are beginning to feel irritated. You know, we've seen Halifa Sallah, you know, I think he even went as far as writing a letter to the commission that if need be, he can even appear. And also the president's advisor, what is his name again? Barrow's advisor.
Okay, no. Is it the National Security Advisor?
Yes.
That's Mamadou Badji.
Mamadou Badji. Yeah. I think he also mentioned something in the newspapers. So it's difficult because when your name is mentioned in such a sensitive issue, what should you do? Should you keep quiet and people say, yes, he's keeping quiet because he's responsible, he's done this and that? Or should you come out and speak your mind, which may also interfere, with the commission? So it's a difficult situation here.
Yes, but at least now we know, according to the chairman, that if anybody is adversely mentioned, then they have it within their rules of procedure to invite the person to come in person or to make a statement, to write a statement.
I think the break is important because it does not only allow them to be able to embark on their site visits, but remember, one of the mandates of the TRRC is to also come up with strong recommendations, that would bring about institutional reforms. And this would allow them time to be able to work on these things as well, not just to go about their site visits, but to be also, able to look into other areas, because they also have units, under the commission, and it really helps them as well. As far as
what they call the committees.
Yes.
They've had various committees.
I think it's true because once the sittings are on, they don't have that time. They are listening, recording, like any of us are doing. But then during these breaks is when they will sit, deliberate, and know where to take it from there.
Thank you very much for setting the stage there for us. So now we go on to our first witness on the 11th, on Monday. It was MC Cham, commonly known as MC Cham. To people of my generation, the name resonates with some awe and formidability. That was the man. Please walk us through his testimony.
Well, MC Cham is former cabinet minister under the PPP regime, and one time very strong politician, quite popular, especially within the Greater Banjul area and even around the Jawara as well, where he first won his elections back in 1962, when he first contested elections.
Yes, this was in Tumana, the constituency of Tumana.
In Tumana, yes. Where he served for a period of 3 decades. I think apart from Sadauda, I don't think any politician has really lasted, that long, in a public office for really that long, And he was one of the first political detainees, after the 1994 military takeover.
But let's stay a bit on his background. Apparently, he came into politics in 1961.
1961. He came into politics in 1961.
Yes.
And I think he has a
passion for United
politics.
Party.
Then the party he joined was UP, they call it.
Trrc United Party.
United Party. That's the party he joined. And I think he played a crucial role even towards the Gambia gaining its independence, because he even mentioned, imagine when a meeting was held in United Kingdom, in Marlborough.
It's Marlborough House, 1964.
Marlborough House, yes, to discuss about the independence of this great nation. He was part of them. He was there with Sadauda and others, even though that was PPP and UP discussing about the future of this country. And then I think the only thing they couldn't agree about at that place was the type of leadership that will happen here. Because
the kind of democracy they wanted, and the composition of the parliament and the executive.
Exactly, because I think MC Cham was saying they want a monarchical, kind of government. I think that's to do with kings, like something like that. I think because that was a time when we were ruled by UK, and there was actually a king, probably, or a queen at that time. A Queen Victoria, probably.
Well, Victoria was way back.
Okay,
but
there was a king at that time.
Monarchy.
Yes, monarchy. I think that's why. Their mind was focused on that. But Sadauda has a different plan altogether. He wanted a democratic,
a more Republican
a more Republican government where it will be like president, vice president, and then a cabinet. And then I think that prevailed at the end.
Yes, but you see here, I think he was touching on a wider subject, because really just before independence there was always this argument, the ideology of what sort of independence that we wanted. So for him it seems that with the United Party they wanted a more gradualist approach, they had a more gradualist approach, and whereas Sir Dawda Jawara had what they call perhaps a more radical approach. He wanted republicanism now, whereas with MC Cham, they wanted a more gradual independence, would still be under the Queen. Queen will still be the head of state, but again, head of government would be a Gambian. What do you think about these?
I think MC, in his testimony, kind of gave us an insight as to what must have informed their demand that, I mean, we want, you know, the monarchical system, you know, as opposed to Sir Dawda and his camp's proposal, you know, for a Republican style of government. Because for them, the reason being at the time was that Gambia is a small country, and, you know, economically, I mean, it was obvious that we would, without aid from our colonial masters, we were really going to struggle if we were to be given complete, I mean, independence, autonomy. You know, autonomy. So this is what, I mean, he believes must have informed their position at the time. But overall, I mean, both parties, one thing they agreed on was that we want independence. But how do we go about it? What kind of system do we have in place? I mean, that was the you know, main argument at the time. But like he put it, it was just a minor difference. But in the end, you know, they decided, you know, it will go Sir Dawda's way.
Yes, but again, it seems as if their position had some mileage, in the sense that the first referendum we had to bring in republicanism, it failed, but it succeeded in the second chance in 1970.
Yes, yes.
So people were quite cautious as well.
Yes,
what do you think?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the second referendum, I mean, they succeeded, but also we've seen a switch here, like MC Cham, you know, switching from UP to PPP.
So around 1970.
Yes, around the 70s, and probably it's because of the second referendum, or I mean, what he said was, he said the leader of the UP passed away, and then obviously
that was
Idun
Jai who passed away.
Yes, and there was this leadership vacancy there, and I think he even mentioned that they approached him to be a leader, but I think the problem was I mean,
he felt that he was inexperienced.
Yes, he's inexperienced. Not only that, but also financially. He believed he didn't have a lot of money to be able to soldier a party like UP. And then he said if he was even approached so that he can head the leadership, but then he didn't. And then that's when he switched to PPP and joined Sir Dawda. But then again, Sir Dawda have a lot of trust in him, because if you look at so many portfolios that were, you know, that he manned at that point, that Sir Dawda trusted him and gave him Ministry of Trade and Information, Youth and Sports, you know, all those things. I think, I mean, that was, I mean, it's a good thing, I think.
Yes, he served with 4 ministries, and the last of which was as Minister of Works and Communication, which he was in the position between 1987 and 1990. So that was where his ministerial career ended. So we're coming on to 1994.
Yeah, but before that also, he did mention about Edward Singate family and the family setup.
Okay, yes.
Like the father, he mentioned that he knew, I mean, Edward's father very well because they attended the same school. And then he mentioned about Edward Peter, you know, staying in his own house, you know, for free. No rent, nothing for free of charge. And I think that was a good gesture. So looking at it, I think he's kind of thinking, these are the people I accommodated, give them, you know, free accommodation. And then these are the same people who toppled a democratically elected government. So I think it's kind of weird to him where he hosted. He knows the father. He said the father was Saiba Singate, and then he converted. He converted
first. It was called Gabriel
Singate. You know, he even mentioned, he said when Edward's father died, he personally contributed a lot, you know, in his burial rites and stuff like that. So I think, you know, the family was very close at the time.
Which really echoes as well OJ's testimony that when Yahya Jammeh's father died, he also did a lot in the burial. Yes. So here, when he was asked about what he felt when he knew that Edward was part of the coup, he said he felt disappointed. And then the other part, when he was asked how he felt about the overthrow of the constitutional order, he said that he was devastated.
Yeah, I was going to delve into his relations with the Singate family, but Boubacar has already done that. But just to quickly look at his reaction, you know, when he learned, you know, of the coup, and knowing that someone is harbored in his house, I mean, for years, is part of it. I mean, it's obvious he was disappointed, and he said, as he said, he never expected that someone like Edward would be part of anything like that, because for him, Edward used to be a good boy, and he used to be quiet and shy, you know, including his sister Peter, his brother rather, Peter, excuse me, except for one or two incidents that he said happened at the time. You know, he, you know, to some extent was a bit stubborn as well. But aside of that, he never expected that Edward would take part in anything like that. And so when it happened, because of his relations with Edward, he was one of those first politicians to speak out against the coup leaders and some of the statements that they were making at the time. You remember, one of the witnesses that came in the first, you know, theme as well did mention of the fact that they were trying to discredit the Jawara government, and you know, saying they didn't bring any development to Gambia and all of that, and he felt it was unfair, you know, and as a result, he decided to speak out against them, and this came after he offered, you know, an interview to one reporter, you know, and after this story came out, you know, they came for him, and you know, you realize that he was targeted subsequently and arrested over and over and over again.
Absolutely. So by 1994, we had this grandee, as it were, of you know, our political iconography, if one can put it that way. So the interview he gave with the journalists, what did he say? Obviously, they were disparaging. By then, the junta was doing its best to disparage the former government, but he came out fighting, telling them that actually the army itself was our creation, which gave you the platform to overthrow. So according to him, that was really the offending remark, and they went for him.
Yes, yes. Actually, he was brave enough to come forward and speak, you know, what he thought at the time was the right thing. I mean, when they are talking about rampant corruption, flamboyant lifestyle, and all that, and he came forward, he said, I mean, this is what the PPP government have done in this country. Look at the roads, look at look at the schools, look at the hospital. Probably when he started talking, and that didn't go down well with the junta, and he was arrested, and then arrested again, allegations made against him. Sometimes they arrest you for this, but then they accuse you of another thing. Yes. You know, he was charged or accused of, you know, organizing anti-AFPRC meetings.
Yes, that was it. So he was also arrested several times. Several times. But the first one, let's take the first one. Let's take it one at a time. Yeah. The first one, he was taken to Banjul police station. Yeah. So he stayed there, he said, what, for a week or so?
Yes.
But there was no torture,
no,
apparently.
That was the first one, yeah.
So it was the second arrest.
When he was arrested, that's when he was accused of organizing an anti-AFPRC meeting somewhere.
Actually,
wasn't that the spades? That's where they saw lots of spades.
What he said was,
that was his house.
It was his statement that the military took over. There was this phrase that he used. He said, to him, it was military indiscipline. And when he said that, I mean, it landed him into trouble again. They were not happy with that. And that was when they brought up all of these crazy accusations and charges, you know, using the spades case. And
yes, apparently where he was arrested by people who couldn't distinguish spades from shovels. that was quite a revelation there. Okay, and then denied, just like with all of them, there's a similar pattern now, a similar pattern of abuse. You'll be denied legal representation. They will deny your family from seeing you. You'll even be denied medical attention where you needed it. This was all the same thing. But let's go on to where the tortures began at Fajara, wasn't it, when he was first taken to Fajara barracks, wasn't it?
Yes, he said, in fact, before he was taken to Fajara barracks, I mean, they came to his house, ransacked it, you know, searched the entire place, and even took along some documents with them, valuable documents. And after that, that was when he was taken to Fajara barracks, you know, with OJ and other political detainees, where they were subsequently seriously, I mean, tortured. And he, you know, couldn't help it, you know, when he was narrating, you know, some of the things that they did to them, you know, at the Fajara barracks.
Yes, absolutely. They were made to sit on a wet floor.
Fajara barracks.
And they had to they were undressed. They had to take off
Fajara
their
barracks
clothes.
at the time, I think it was a meeting point. I call it, because wherever they get you, they will, I mean, twist you around NIA, other places, but then at the end, I mean, there is the congregation at Fajara Barracks. That's where they bring you, and then that's where you stay. Like all OJ and Co, when they explain about their experience, that's where they ended up. All this Fire and Co, that's where they ended up. So they have there's a plan, you know. They take you around to NIA, torture you, take you to different places, but at the end, you know, the end of the is Fajara Barracks. So that's why they brought in Fajara Barracks. And then the humiliation is gone through. The torture, when he explained, like, you know, stripping you naked and then beating, making you to sit on the wet floor, I mean, in that cold, and then beating you up, walking on soldiers, hitting them with their boots and walking on top of them, making all of them to lie down. Yeah, it's really sad.
Yes, and even the nature of the arrest. Yes. Because at one of the arrests, they pointed a gun at his little daughter. Who was 13, between 13 and 16. Soma. That was.
I think the like you said, the nature, I mean, of the arrest really still leaves a lot of question marks. If you look at, I mean, the way they were arrested, I mean, mostly in front of the family members, you know, you are taken, you know, you're roughed up, taken, you know, bundled into a car, you know.
Then that's why he mentioned Almamo Mane.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
and remember when
he said terrible man.
Yeah, and remember when he said they ransacked his house, I mean, no inventory of the items that they were taking, I mean, was taken at the time. I mean, they were taken. I mean, they were in custody. No charge against them. Kept in custody for quite a long time. Tortured. They underwent mock executions.
Yes.
You know, and all of these things. Yes. And I think, you know, really, these are things that are quite disheartening.
When it comes to the house thing, there's a lot to read that even, because obviously 2 of his compounds were seized.
Yeah, they were confiscated.
One in Banjul, one in Fajara, and then again used by the junta.
The junta, yes.
Again, he said he has like 60,000 cement blocks there. They all disappeared.
At least 80% also disappeared.
Okay. And then he installed new air conditioners. I mean, at the time. 6 or so. You know, I mean, and then the family were asked to move out only with their belongings, nothing else. That's very true.
Unbelievable. And then, but something sort of curious happened, because whilst they were in detention, was it at Mile 2, when the commander changed, the army commander, Boubacar Bah, when Jatta came, then things began to change as well with their situation there. What do you think that what was going on there? Because when they asked him, he said, well, when they, you know, they've nearly killed you. You've reached a point, you've reached a certain threshold, they had to either come back, retreat, or kill you. So perhaps that was the reason why their conditions, their situation changed at the prisons.
Yes, I think Jatta too, I mean, for now it's early and one wouldn't be able to ascertain if he, I mean, at some point, whether he at some point was a perpetrator as well. But from the testimonies we're getting so far, it's like he played a key role in ensuring that, you know, at least he was kind of providing some form of protection for the detainees as well, because every time he visits them, their conditions kind of get better, you know, because he was giving command to some of these junior officers that you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that to them, and I think he kind of, you know, played that role, you know, wherein he was kind of protecting them. But aside of that, you know, I think what they went through really, for whatever crime one must have committed, you know, is quite inhuman.
That's it. So let's move on a bit. There was one more incident that happened which he recounted, which is quite important. He said one day they saw Babali and Muntaha Faye. They had come to them, apparently sent by the junta, to come and appeal to them. Maybe they were thinking of releasing them, but they didn't want them to be involved in politics at all.
Yes, he said some religious leaders, including Baba Lee. Baba Lee's name is becoming prominent in this issue. And that reminds me of one of the detainees who said Muslim religious leaders did not play any role. You remember that? He said the bishop went to Mile 2. Probably that person didn't end up at Fajara Barracks. That's why he didn't know. Because we've seen now Imam Baba Lee, and then after Baba Lee spoke to them there, that they are sent by the junta and that they shouldn't be involved in politics, and also if they would discard the plans they have, because they, I mean, allegedly falsely accuse them of, you know, planning to rebel against the government or bring in foreign forces to depose the junta. And then he said, Jammeh said, if you are going to, not going by your plans, then I'll release you. And then obviously they told Baba Lee, they have no plans. Some of them said they are even innocent. They are not even political detainees. And then that's how their release came about. But it's important to see, to say here that religious leaders have actually played a role, because now we've seen Imam Baba Lee, when the other witness was saying Muslim religious leaders were not involved. So they are involved now. We've seen that picture emerging.
Yes, I think what happened at the time, the junta was working on entrenching themselves in power. And as a result, you need to also understand that people like MC Cham, O.J. Jallow, I mean, were quite popular at the time. Hussein Njai. These were popular politicians, and they had a huge following at the time. And as a result, they had to tame these people, for them to be able to entrench themselves. Because if the people that are always speaking out against you are silent, I mean, you have an easy ride. And basically, this is what they were doing. But it wasn't like they committed crimes which warranted their arrest. No. I mean, I think the whole idea was, let's silence them so we can have an easy ride, entrench ourselves.
Yes, but here it went beyond silencing them. It was also, let's punish them. So, one could have imagined where you feel that these people were a threat to your rule, and then you put them aside. But again, not only that, the torture. So the savagery of it, this really puts a different spin onto all of these things. It made it as if it was much more than politics. Something else was going on here.
Indeed, it has gone beyond politics, because I think when it comes to politics, if you arrest somebody for doing something or allegedly doing something, you go by the procedures, go by the right ways, document the person, probably let the police do their job or do your investigation and hand it over to the police, to do whatever they are going to do, like in a democratic and the way the court should handle the matter. But then you bring in somebody that you accuse of doing something, and you are taking the law into your own hands, savagely beating the person, torturing, broken arms, broken fingers. I think that's uncalled for.
But for me,
it's a moral collapse.
For me, torture of any form, anywhere, I mean, is unacceptable. In fact, if you arrest a politician, and you're telling me that he want to embark on an activity that comes with some form of violence, I mean, to some extent, I would disagree. I think what they were doing really wasn't right. Even if someone is not in support of your agenda, if you feel they've committed a certain crime, I mean, you follow the due process. I mean, take them to court, and then let the courts decide. If they decide they've committed a crime, whatever the law says, let it be applied. But you cannot just, arrest people arbitrarily and keep them in solitary confinement, to have them tortured, going as far as subjecting them to, mock executions. That was wayward. Really.
Yeah. But it seems here that with the junta, the priority wasn't the rule of law or human rights or anything like that, but simply to entrench themselves. And the pattern seemed to have emerged. Remember Samba Jallow, the teacher, somebody went to him, AFPRC man, to try to get him to be on their side, to stand elections for Nyamina Dankunku area. But he refused, and then they followed him and did whatever they did to him. And then with OJ, once he gave a criticism, tried to defend the former regime, they went for him. With MC Cham. So with them now, it was simply about being power, being in power.
It's a case of they want to entrench themselves, they want to silence the others, and then it's a case of be with me or you are in trouble.
Yes, so that was what happened throughout. So the picture is quite clear. So now the last part, they are often given the opportunity to give us their advice, to their reflections on how we can have institutions in the future where this never again will be practicalized. What did he say about that? One of the things he said about government, he felt that we shouldn't see government as a separate entity. It is easy for people, sometimes say, oh, it's not us, it's government, it's government, it's government, as if it is, we are not. In many ways, we are the government. So take us through that, which is very important for us to understand.
Yes, that was the first thing he said, that Gambians shouldn't disassociate themselves from the government. They should understand that it is their government, and whatever government does, I mean, is done in their name. Also, he did talk about leadership and the need to have our men and women in uniform, you know, have their capacities, you know, built to some extent, you know, at least so they'll have a good grounding, you know, in terms of good education, good training, you know, and to ensure that, you know, at least they have an idea of how it, I mean, it works to be a security personnel under a democratic state. And it's important because for him, most of these people that were involved, you know, including the junta members at the time, you know, didn't have, you know, to some extent their level of education really wasn't, you know, that good. And this, he believed, must have played a role as well. That, you know, there shouldn't be any shortcut to success. If you want to earn anything in this life, you've got to perspire for it. You need to work hard for it. And you know, I think it's really important. There are quite a few salient points that he made mention of, but this, for me, really stand out.
Yes, and there was also something on citizenship. Just quickly before we go into break, he said something on citizenship, appearing to suggest that we should guard our citizenship very, very carefully. You know, seeming to suggest that we are quite porous. Yes. Anybody can just come in. There is a freedom of movement, which is laudable, but again, the people you want to come here are those who would add value to your economy.
Well, he mentioned about that citizenship, that we should take ownership of our country. You know, that I don't know why he made that reference, whether it's about the present. I don't think it has anything to do with the present, you know, other people from other countries, like the security forces from other countries in our country now. I'm not sure about that. But then, you know, what he said is actually true, because it's a good advice. Because if you look at the Gambia now, there are so many foreigners in this country, Mr. Boch. You know, Gambia wasn't prone to crimes that are happening now. Before, we don't know those kind of crimes. But also, at the same time, sometimes it's due to conditions that the Gambia, we cannot control ourselves. Because this is Africa, and now we are talking about ECOWAS. We heard about ECOWAS green cards or ECOWAS ID cards. So obviously, look at the bridge they've just built in Farafenye. So these porous borders, it will be difficult. I mean, it will be very difficult to eradicate these kind of things, because I know for some reason that, you know, the Gambia, when these crimes started happening here, where, you know, unknown crimes like crimes that Gambia is not used to start happening here, is because of the wars that happen in the neighboring countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and then obviously there was an influx. Criminals started running to the Gambia. It's the only, among the English-speaking countries. Sierra Leone is English, Liberia is English. So obviously, if something happened there, you want an English-speaking country where you can, you know, be well accommodated and also speak the same language. So I think that's the problem with our borders. Obviously, it's porous because of things like that in Africa.
We'll continue our discussions after this short break. We'll be right back.
From an early age, we value the feeling of speed, the thrill of the wind as we rush to our destinations, the feel of our feet bounding over the ground, the way the world blurs as we rush by. Faster, faster than a ray of light, I'm flying. I have one speed, I have one gear. Keep on moving, I won't stop till I get there. Want to experience speed? Then subscribe to the Gambia's 4G LTE mobile network, QCell. With speeds of up to 45 megabytes per second, you can get online in the blink of an eye. The fastest browsing, stream videos faster, do much more faster. Just dial *335# to join the fastest club. QCell's 4G LTE mobile network. Go faster. For more information, call 111. QCell, Senior Boss. We innovate, others follow.
Welcome back to our program, the weekly roundup of the TRRC, here with myself, Boubacar Bah, and Ansumane Eso Nyasi. Just before the break, we were talking about MC Cham. So the next witness was Boubacar Bah. So Eso, please walk us through his testimony.
Well, Captain Boubacar Bah's testimony, I think, you know, would be remembered in many ways and for years to come, given that he's the first accused or alleged perpetrator to have come to the TRRC and acknowledge committing, I mean, some of these heinous crimes that they've been accused of committing, and going as far as even, you know, saying whatever the witnesses must have said about him is true, you know. He was one of the soldiers who were at the Fajara barracks, you know, at the time. These political detainees, like we made mention of OJ, MC Cham, and all the others were detained there. And we remember during OJ's testimony, he made mention of his name, that Captain Boubacar Bah is one of the people that allegedly tortured him. And in his testimony, I mean, I think after, I mean, his testimony, I mean, drew a lot of public reaction, you know. Some, you know, accepting his apology, others saying he was actually too brave to have, I mean, come out public to say, I committed these crimes. I mean, I did so and so to Mr. X, and you know. He said when he was doing these things, it was under the influence and directives of Almamo Mane, who have been described by many of the witnesses, I mean, as a very ruthless man. Captain Bah, in his testimony, to everyone's surprise, said he personally focused more on OJ than any other political detainee, and this was as a result of what Almamo Mane told him about OJ, that OJ didn't like the junta at the time, that OJ is working with some Americans, you know, and they would invade the country. He said a lot of crazy stuff, and as a young officer at the time, you know the euphoria that surrounded the military takeover, especially within the military cycle at the time. So he didn't take that lightly, and he said he was the first. After Almamo hit him, he was the second to hit him as well. And OJ, in his testimony, did allege that it was Captain Boubacar Bah who broke his eye, and this he confirmed as well. And you know, I found that quite puzzling, because I never thought, of course I expected that probably at some point maybe some people might be forced to say, oh, I accept, I mean, or admit committing these crimes. But for him to come this early and say, you know what, I did this, especially someone who's still serving in the force, I really didn't expect that. But I think it was quite brave of him.
That's it, and Boubacar, here, I think here we can stop saying allegedly, because he confessed.
That's what I want to say. That's exactly what I want to say. I don't want to say alleged now, you know, because now, to me, we've seen victims speaking, OJ is among. We've seen now perpetrators speaking.
At least one of them.
One of them, at least one of them. So obviously, we've seen the tortured, we've seen the torturer now, you see. So when it comes to Boubacar Bah, for me, I have two cases here. One, he said he was told by Almamo about how bad OJ is, how he's trying to, how wicked he is, how he's trying to bring, foreign forces to come and do stuff in this country. I don't understand why, you should be angry about hearsay. You heard Almamo say this, and you believe it, and you take action. You see, so I'm actually perplexed about it. I don't know why that's what happened. But also
But he said that he was young, immature,
well, I'm coming. He said
inexperienced.
Almamo is actually senior, and he believes him, he trusts him. So obviously that might be the influence. But sometimes you need to put one hand together before you take action. At that point in time, I don't think, that was happening. Also, he said he was young. What is the age for joining the army?
Well, he said he was in his mid-20s at the time.
Yeah, he said 20s. But what's the age for joining the army? So would you bring people as young as, according to what he's saying, his age, he was not reasoning well at the time. So to join the army if you are not reasoning well at that kind of age? Because there's an age to join the army. So obviously, army will not take a young age, put a gun in your hand when you cannot reason properly. I don't think that's the case here. But no matter what he says, obviously, he's done it, whether deliberate or not deliberate, or whether he was young, or whether he trusts Almamo or not. But what is important here in his testimony is coming out to accept the truth. I think that's very important. Because if people were angry when OJ spoke, oh, look at what they done to him, who is this Boubacar Bah? But the moment he came out, most of that anger turned into sympathy. Sympathy. Kind of, because even myself, when OJ said that, I was saying, but this man is wicked. But when he came and faced the commission and apologized and almost in tears I mean, I actually felt it. And it's good that OJ actually forgive him before he even asked for forgiveness.
But this takes us, absolutely, this takes us to our next point. Now, what are we going to do? For instance, we have more people coming to confess who are already in the system. If you're already working in the system and you are a perpetrator, now there's an issue for authorities now to deal with. What happens next? Because remember, we haven't got to Kasama's case yet, the former ADC to Jawara. We're going to get to his case. Remember, towards the end, he said that known perpetrators shouldn't be allowed to serve in public office. What do you think?
Yes, I think given that this commission is basically an investigative, institution that is looking into some of these alleged crimes, I believe, I mean, if you ask me individually what I think, I mean, personally, anyone who's been adversely mentioned and you're still serving in the system, I think what should be done, or probably if you come out to admit committing some of these crimes that they've been accused of, I think what should be done for me is to kind of suspend you until the process is over, and then if one is going to be prosecuted, if it is taken to court, and then the court, whatever the court decides, then so be it. But if you're being forgiven as well, then you can go ahead and continue your work. Because already, I mean, you remember, even after his testimony, when he was asked to make his final remarks, he said, my biggest worry now is how the world will view me, my family, my colleagues at work, and even people outside. Yeah. So you can see already it leaves you in a zone where you find, I mean, there's the discomfort already, and you're quite uncomfortable because you don't know.
Yes, the discomfort alone. Yeah. I mean, the inner feelings. I think that's enough. For me, I don't support the case of suspending somebody because they mention your names. To me, I think that will be a witch hunt now. That will take another dimension, because when they said reconciliation, would that be reconciliation? Is this the kind of, is it becoming a courthouse where they mention a name and then they want to prove you, I mean, guilty until afterwards? I don't think.
No, but not quite, because remember that here the circumstances are slightly different. Here we don't have allegations anymore. We've gone beyond that. We've got a confession that this person did A, B, or C, and D. Yeah. But I think the TRRC, they have at their disposal all kinds of instruments for reconciliations and reparations, so that we will leave to them. Yes. But perhaps what one is thinking about here is the public policy. People who are his superiors right now in the army, how will this affect his relationship with other people? How would it affect his function, as it were, where he is, given that what we know? So it will more of be a public policy or administrative issue at work, much more than anything else.
Just a quick one, Mr. Mboy. I think I said that because if you are very observant, you realize that some of these witnesses that have appeared already, there is a high possibility that they would appear again. I'm referring to those that are still serving in the force. There's a high possibility they would appear again, So if one admits to committing a certain crime, and there's a possibility that you could be called again for a different incident, I think that also needs to be looked at. That is where I'm speaking from. That if that is the case, then it's like you're not only a perpetrator in one case, but possibly 2, 3, or even 4 cases. And if that's the case, then how do you look at the individual? I mean, already he's mentioned that he's uncomfortable already, despite the fact that he's come out to publicly admit having committed this crime. But I mean, it leaves him in wonderland, because now he doesn't know what his fate is.
Yes, but let's move on. Even he himself, in the end, he was arrested and detained for a while, and then he was released. But he apologized. He was profoundly apologetic.
Well, he apologized, but what
seemed like it.
What sounds volumes here is what he has done rather than what happened to him, to be honest. Yes, he's also a victim, but the case against OJ, I think, has overshadowed his own, arrest and detention, because his first arrest, he was in torture. That was when a dead ram was buried at the football field. And then the second arrest, the second arrest is very significant because it shows his allegiance, to the coalition government at the early stages when the political impasse was happening.
Yeah, but was this the time, according to him, when Sol Badji asked him to go and put explosives
at the GNPC petrol stations?
But he didn't do that.
Okay, that also shows that, well, at that time, he's not in his 20s, he's mature and grown up, because he knows planting bombs. Probably at the time at the army barracks, you tell him plant a bomb, he would have done it, you know, because he wasn't mature enough. Yes. I'm blaming him, but at the same time, I'm trying to defend him because we have to look at both sides here.
Yep, here we're just analyzing the blame or not. That's for the TRRC. Yes. So now we move on to our next. We move on to our next witness.
Yes.
Lamin Jawara.
Interesting. It's one of those testimonies that I found, you know, quite interesting. Jawara, who was defied the junta from day one until, you know, towards the end of Jammeh's regime around 2014, when he eventually decided, you know, it's like I said during you know, our telephone conversation. For him, it went to a point where it was like, okay, you either join them or you are no more.
Yes, but let's look at the nature of his arrest. He also, how was he arrested? What did he do?
Well, Jawara was arrested also after he granted an interview to journalists, you know, because you know, he was just giving his view of the situation at the time, you know, and what he made of the change of government, the junta, and some of the things that they were saying and they were doing. He felt it wasn't right for them to discredit the PPP government, I mean, entirely, and he decided to speak out. And as a result, you know, he was targeted and arrested, you know, several times. You know, I think he's one of those politicians who were arrested, you know, on numerous occasions, you know, throughout the Jammeh regime.
Yes. Why Jawara, I always compare him to OJ. These two politicians have, the way I actually portray them is like, you know, I always say nobody is prone to torture, but these people are prone to torture. If you look at the way these people have been tortured several times, but also they stand the test of time. With all that what happened, they've been tortured, a lot of things happened to them, especially OJ. But in Jawara's case, at least at some point, he joined.
That's a crucial difference in the end. He joined the APRC, but OJ never did.
The APRC. OJ never did, but he actually joined. But also, it was like he said, if he didn't join, he joined because he was afraid. If he didn't join, something might have happened to him. OJ didn't join, nothing had happened to him. But Jawara eventually, I mean, they all have different feelings and different opinions. But he did join Jammeh at some point. It didn't last long. I mean, they separated again.
Yeah, I think in his testimony, he said at some point it was clear to Jammeh that he didn't like him. And as a result, Jammeh wasn't comfortable working with him. So he was sacked. I remember attending two of his court sittings when he was arrested, you know, in 2014. I still remember that, after he was sacked from his cabinet position. And, you know, he was accused of, you know, really crimes that, you know, at the time, even if you know, if you were closely following, you would understand that really some of these charges didn't hold any ground. But I think for him, the fact that he gave up, you know, towards the very end is really, you know, what I found, you know, quite, you know, I just don't get that. But like he said, it was, I mean, out of fear for his life, because already he's gone through a lot, you know.
So here we have Lamin Jawara. I think one of his nicknames is the Lion.
The Lion.
He had gone through all sorts of torture, didn't he? I mean, lots of arrests. The same story. But with him, he wrote a letter. Yeah. Yes. So what was this letter to Yahya Jammeh? What was contained in the letter? What was it about?
Well, the letter actually that he wrote to Jammeh was regarding their conditions, one, in prison, and the way they were being treated for, like he said, doing nothing, you know. And he brought to Jammeh's attention all of these things. And I think to some extent, Jammeh, for one reason or the other, you know, eventually or subsequently decided, you know, that he be released. But of course, that was prior to 2014, before he joined. And then in 2014, when he was imprisoned, he was there until, you know, during the political impasse when he was released. So, you know, he is someone who really has gone through a lot during Jammeh's time.
Touching revelations from him is, one of them is Janjambure prisons. Yes. He mentioned the then commissioner of CRR. I mean, he keeps saying they molested me. That I don't know what he actually meant by that, because whenever the council said
it was the inappropriate treatment.
Yes, obviously,
that
but he stressed the word a lot, like molested him. Then Nyambure precincts has gone through hell, and then again he mentioned during one of his arrests with the Imam of Brikama, Karaboture.
Yes, the incident at Denton Bridge.
Yes, then
Baba
Job
Job
and his boys, the alleged, you know.
That's a familiar pattern by now.
Interestingly, he said it's the soldiers who were on guard who actually came to rescue him. So, I mean, Jawara has gone through a lot, to be honest. He's gone through a lot. It's good that, I mean, they are still alive to come and tell us what's happening.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on to the next. We have Seni Faye. Tell us about Seni Faye.
Interesting.
So now it seems we're just getting civilians. The first session we were getting more testimonies from ex-servicemen and current service.
Seni Faye,
now we have Seni Faye here.
For me, with Seni Faye,
yes.
That reminds me of Bashamba.
Yes.
Because it's similar, kind of. It's like, I don't understand, because it's like they were arresting, you know, politicians, I mean, military people in uniform, but at the same time arresting civilians. So I don't know what has civilians to do with this case.
But this was the thing, we've got it. I mean, some of them you would be approached to be, you know, to go up to you. You refuse, then you're in trouble.
Like Bachsamba.
That's it. And in others, you make a little criticism, they will come for you.
For this man, he said he went to the American embassy. Picked a form. The embassy was closed. Yeah. On his way home, he found a truck. And they said, get in, and he didn't know where he was going, take him to Bakau, and then he later on mentioned their names. At Bakau, he said, I'm not going anymore. And then they ran on him, the whole vehicle, and started beating him, where they broke his ankle. Yes. So it's kind of funny, like a civilian, somebody, a market trader, selling at the market, Serekunda market. What has he done? And
he was one of 42, wasn't it, that were accused of colluding or plotting with Ibu Jallow, who was one time spokesperson of the junta.
Seni's testimony is one of the most interesting testimonies we've had so far. Here's a man who says, even some of his colleagues who were arrested at the time as well, you know, he never met them before. He don't even know them. So it's like he was just picked up, and that's it for him. And he was part of the Oje Jallow group that was taken to Fajara barracks, you know, tortured, you know, underwent mock execution. And one thing he said that, you know, I found quite hard, really, is the fact that most of his colleagues, most of those 42 people, detainees. Almost 22 of them, of those detainees, died already, afterwards. And 6 are bedridden as we speak. And that really I found quite hard. You know, I think the fact that after they were released, you know, it's really hard having to stay, silent all these years for over 2 decades. Having to keep this in you, and now that you having to come sit before, the whole country and narrate these stories. You know, it brings back these memories of this, you know, gruesome, you know, treatment that was meted to them. I think Seni's testimony wasn't long, but I found it quite interesting. And some of these things, he actually gave us an insight as to what actually, was really happening at the time. Because you realize even with OJ, with Samba Jallow, they were just, briefly telling us what happened. But Seni went as far as telling us about the incident that happened with the Aku woman as well, the Aku lady, which, you know, other detainees didn't you know, talk about.
Absolutely. Yes, and that brings us again to, Almamo Mane again, because he mentioned the same Almamo Mane, you know, then Bombardier comes in again, you know. But for him, where I felt is like, he explained his own ordeal. He never said a tear. But when he mentioned the woman, then he cried. Yes. Very interesting point here. Yes. It's like the respect and, you know, him being a man, okay. But then this one woman, he spoke about that, you know, was really tortured, you know, in the midst, telling a woman to undress in amidst men, you know, kind of. But I respect him for that. Absolutely. For crying because of thinking about the woman.
Oh yes, this has been...
After the woman, for himself, he didn't cry. Yes. But if a woman, he was crying.
So it has been
interesting.
So it has been a regular occurrence, isn't it? From Sheriff Gomez, people breaking down. It's like, that's why they call it, perhaps it could be cathartic. to relieve the experience,
yes.
get it out of
yes,
yourself,
yes.
and then perhaps let go.
Yeah.
That's really the reconciliation.
No,
it's
looking at it, I heard it's good, you know, to release what is inside you, because building it in doesn't help. But once you release it, then it goes. You feel at ease, and this is what is happening.
Yes. So, gentlemen, we are to our last witness. You know, he testified. He gave his testimony on Thursday. Mamadou Lamin Gassama. He was the ADC, Jawara's ADC in 1994. So tell us, let's go straight to 22nd July 1994. What happened?
Well, interesting testimony it was. Gassama, of course, was personal assistant to President Jawara at the time. And on the morning of 22nd July 1994, upon arrival at the State House, he said he saw the Vice President who, remember earlier we said he wasn't seen, you know,
at the airport on the 21st.
So he saw him and the American ambassador at the time, Winter, and some American military officers, because remember they were here, they were supposed to have this military exercise with members of the Gambian Armed Forces, something that the commander-in-chief and the president at the time wasn't aware of.
No idea.
And as Minister of Defense as well, he was there, and you know, it was him who also approached Gassama to tell him that you need to go and talk to your old man, because he's insisting that he's not going to leave. And at the time, Gassama didn't know what was even happening, you know. So he went upstairs, and you know, he said also that Salauda repeatedly refused to dress up and, you know, leave the State House and move with them to the ship, you know, at least, you know. But he tried, and you know, at some point he was able to convince him, but this was after he was able to convince, you know, Lady Chillen and the family to join them, you know, before they moved to the ship.
So that's it. So now they were bundled off to the ship because they were scared of what was heading towards them. So now at the ship, what happened?
Well, at the ship, they tried to, you know, establish what was happening, you know, at the time. And I remember he said, the president at some point sent Basala Janji, then IG, to go to the State House and find out what was happening. And also he said the American ambassador was with them at the ship, and he was, you know, in contact with someone. But every time he gets close to him, he'll put the phone down, and he got quite suspicious about this. And
on two occasions,
you know, on 2 occasions, and that is one reason why he thinks that, you know, he might have had, you know, probably some information as to what was, you know, about to happen. And after that, he said the ship rather moved up to, around the State House, or behind the State House, where they were, you know, until on Sunday.
Using binoculars, and could see what was happening,
you know, at the State House, until on Sunday when they actually sailed off to Senegal. But that was after, you know, negotiating with the Senegalese government, and you know, which took 2 or 3 days before they accepted to grant Sadauda and his entourage sanctuary.
And while Sadauda was on the frigate, he communicated with Edward and tried to get them to go to barracks for him to come back, but they wouldn't budge. So that was it. So in Senegal, let's go to Senegal.
Well, in Senegal,
so what happened?
He didn't have access to make any international calls, or he tried to talk to the Senegalese government as well, you know, but you know, all that didn't materialize. And the closest person to the Senegalese government within the Salauda camp at the time was his vice president and Bibi Dabo. But these people too, you know, were missing at some point, except for Sekou Sabally, who was with him throughout. But you know, not much really wasn't done, and the Senegalese government, you know, didn't offer any support.
Well,
but then, yes,
the Senegalese government, there's something here, because I think, the failure for the ship to leave that early, like on a Friday, is because they were negotiating with Senegal. Obviously, they were not going to America, so they were negotiating with Senegal, so that Sadauda and the entourage can go to Senegal. And then that negotiation actually took like 2 days or 3 days. And then, you know, during those negotiations, I think Senegal, they actually came up with a condition that he can go to Senegal, provided he won't be involved in any politics. Yes. And then that was one of the conditions. That's why he was accepted.
Exactly. So in Senegal, we understand from Gassama, the third day, while into being in Senegal, Jawara was doing all that he could to restore democracy here. Apparently, he spoke to Jerry Rawlings. In fact, he had gone to Jerry Rawlings, spoken to people in Guinea and Nigeria. Tell us about that. He did really what he could to restore things immediately.
Well, what I found quite puzzling is the fact that up to that point, Salauda still didn't believe that his government was over. I mean, he thought, because remember, I mean, the members of the armed forces embarked on 2 mutinies earlier. So for him, it was probably the same thing, you know, and maybe at some point they would purge and go back to the barracks. But unfortunately for him, that didn't happen. So, I mean, that was, I think, for me, the reason why he was making all these efforts, trying to talk to some of his, I mean, close colleagues, I mean, I would call it at the time, the likes of Jerry Rawlings and all the others. But unfortunately, it didn't materialize.
All of that came to no avail. So in the end, he left for Britain. He left for England.
Yeah.
And then, what happened next?
Well, I think eventually he resigned to his fate,
yes.
and he was in England where he was and had to work on helping his people settle, because he went with a huge entourage as well. And some of these people, you know, he had to seek for asylum for all of these people and have them settled in. Well, and that was it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. But I think this Mamadou Lamin Gassama, you know, played a very important role here, you know, because as they said, he was the last person you can see before you see the president. I think he played a very good role in trying to convince the president to leave. I think that was very good. And his testimony has unraveled, I mean, a lot of things that were playing in people's mind. So his testimony is quite crucial.
And his investigations, he said, quite interesting towards the end. He said he made certain investigations and they could see a channel of communications between the Ministry of Defense and some of the soldiers. Tell us something about it, even the rumors of briberies.
Yes, he said one of the senior officers at the then NSS, you know, prepared a report after, you know, rumors, you know, because at the time rumors were arrived that some cabinet ministers were involved in, you know, bribing some of the soldiers, you know, and all of that, so they would embark on this coup, which eventually happened later. And as a result, one of the senior officers of the NSS was assigned to look into these things, and his report implicated, you know, the then defense minister and some cabinet ministers, and as a result, he was fired, you know, and this happened after there was a directive from the Ministry of Defense that, you know, he should be relieved of his services, and that he believes, you know, really the report at the time was accurate. You know, there must have been some element of truth in it, you know, and he believes that there possibly was a civilian collusion in this.
Possibly future witnesses, the testimonies will shed more light on this. So we've had our 5, they had their 5 witnesses, you know, that testified this week.
Yeah, these are
the 5 for this week. So the broader picture that is emerging now here. It seems as if there was a desecration, one can call it that, a desecration of respect. These people, the MC Chams, the Jawaras, the Usainu Njais, you know, the iconography, you know, one couldn't get any higher. And yet it seems these were the people that they really wanted to trample on, just to show. I mean, it's quite unbelievable of what they thought of the inheritance. It was a sacrilege. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, the people who were left behind, these ministers, and I mean, stayed here and they paid the price. I mean, for it. It wasn't actually unfair, but then this is how things unfold. I mean, but then again, as you said, I mean, it's beginning to emerge, and then one may still try to wonder whether, I mean, now, I mean, people within Jawara's own government, you know, are part of the making of this thing. Although we also know, or we can say that probably Jawara also, the party wasn't going right at the time. There was infighting, I believe, I mean, among parties, and then probably they might have seen probably that Jawara has stayed long, I don't know, or maybe during that meeting in Mansakonko where Jawara said enough is enough, he's going to leave, and then
he recanted.
Exactly.
There can be parallels here. There's something that really our government, our coalition government must learn, that when you have these political splits within, it makes you take your eye off the ball. And when you promise that you want to do something, please do, otherwise that might engender all sorts of rivalries behind the scenes. Look at the coalition. We talk about Barrow Dabo split. PPP. And then we talk about the MOU, something was promised, now you want to renege on it. So we are beginning to see similar patterns. Yes. I'm not saying that we'll fall back in the hands of the army.
What happened during the Jawara, that contributed to the coup is emerging again in this coalition government. I'm not saying, I mean, it will be the same scenario, but it's the same thing. Dabo and Barrow not pulling together. We all know, whether they say it publicly or not, we know, innuendos, insinuations, we've seen them, we've heard them. Okay, PPP, Papa Njai, Bibi Dabo, the same thing is emerging. NCP suspended because of, you know, and then which party again? Except Mama Kande's party.
So
all these parties are in turmoil, they are in fighting. Everybody wants a position. All of them want to be leaders. This cannot be possible.
I think
imagine. How would we trust these people to let them lead us when we've seen them fighting? What about us? We are watching.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a similar, pattern playing out. You know, of course, as at 1994, there was too much division within political parties in this country, not just the PPP. Remember, MC Cham in his testimony also said, after they lost their party leader, the UP party I'm talking about at the time, there was a split within the party. There was a division within the party. And as a result, he decided to cross carpet to the PPP. And also, before the coup in '94, there was division within the PPP. We're seeing a similar pattern playing out now with the APRC. We've seen earlier the MC Bah camp, the Sidinjai there. We've seen, Fabakary Tombong Jatta there, and NCP being suspended because there are two camps. With the PPP, as we speak now, you have the Papanjai camp, the Bibi Dabo camp, with the UDP as well, and the Barrow scenario. Within the coalition, you have those that are in support of the agreement, those that are not now. You know, I think we're seeing a similar pattern playing out now. And what politicians must understand is that these divisions don't help. In fact, they contribute towards your downfall. And until they realize this, we'll keep having the same scenarios all the time.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We've come to the end of the our weekly roundup of the proceedings at the TRRC. We hope that it's been interesting, and we've touched on so many different points. No doubt, as we get more testimonies, we'll maybe adjust the picture and all the rest of it. So hopefully you will join us next week. I am Mamadou Mbodj, Boubacar Bah, and Ansumana Eswenyasi. See you next week.